We are predicting the nearly 40 cuts that the Colts have to make to get down to their 53-man roster. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can get a free bet of a bet of $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. What's up, everybody? This is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks of HorseshoeHuddle.com. I am your boots on the ground resident credentialed media member for the site, and Zach is the rootinest, tootinest film guy in the whole biz. And today we got tough work ahead of us because we are getting this 91-man Colts roster down to 53 players. The Colts have to do that in actuality by next Tuesday afternoon. Just as we started this, the Bengals have already started to slash their roster. I think they just got rid of 11 guys. So over the next coming days, expect to see these things start to take shape. So we're just going to go kind of from the top to the bottom of the depth chart and go over who we have making it, maybe some of the tougher cuts, and then the differences that Zach and I have in each. So I'm not going to waste any more time because we got to get through this whole thing here, guys. So I'll go ahead and start with mine at quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. I have Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco at quarterback. At running back, Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon, Evan Hull, and Tyler Goodson. I have 4 running backs making it. I didn't really expect myself to do that throughout the majority of the summer. And then at wide receiver, it's the 6 that we've been talking about the whole time that we've been confident in all summer. Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, Anthony Gould, and Ashton Dulin. Some of these have gotten a little more interesting in the last week or so, but for the most part, I've kind of stuck true to what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I have the exact same guys making the initial 53-man roster. My only exception that I kind of added to this, and maybe it's me cheating, Jake, because every time we do something like this, like some kind of competition or like comparing list, I always do some kind of cheating with it. But I played around with putting guys on IR and such like that, and I did not have Sermon as one of the guys they placed on IR before the 53. So Sermon, I do have making the initial 53, but I have him going on IR after that 53-man roster is set. That way he doesn't fall under the only 2 players you can bring back rule that is set across the NFL. Because I think you can put 2 players on IR on cut down day, like when you make the move, and you can designate 2 players to return later in the season. And I already have 2 other players that I'm doing that with on here. So Sermon, I have him making the initial 53. They put him on regular IR, and then he can return at some other point in the season. Because I think you can do that with other guys as well. You still have it's like the typical rule with returning guys from IR. That's just 2 for the cut down date rule. Mm-hmm. Sermon, I'm not saying that like his hamstring injury is serious. Like this is not like a source thing. It's just he's been out for quite a bit with his hamstring. He really hasn't been on the practice field at all. And Goodson and Hull have played really well. So I think the Colts could just be safe with it and put him on IR to start the season and roll with Goodson and Hull. And by the way, Goodson's been awesome lately. Yeah. Like Tyler Goodson has been fantastic lately for the Colts. And for a role that we don't think we don't think there's going to be many snaps going around for backups behind Jonathan Taylor. But in the few snaps you're going to get, like a Tyler Goodson looks pretty good to me right now. So that's why I had Sermon just going on IR after the fact, but he makes my initial 53, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So for me, I think my biggest thing that sticks out is the 4 running backs. Now I have all of them making it. Now Trey Sermon's injury does kind of factor into it for me because, I mean, let's say he's not ready week 1, but maybe it's not going to take long enough to put him on IR. So I'm kind of going on the other side of the coin there. They do still need a little more insurance there. So they want to have the 3 guys. But when it comes down to it, I also just still don't know really what they would prefer in Hull versus Goodson. If I had to pick 3, Goodson would be my final one in. Just because something I've recently explained is if you're looking for a true change of pace, Goodson's your guy, because Hull is a little too similar to Sermon, whereas Goodson gives you that twitch and that explosive element. Hull has run the ball really well also. I think they've got similar numbers throughout the preseason, but you could just tell a difference in styles and abilities between the two. And if you're looking to really, I think you've got Jonathan Taylor who can do everything. He's got agility, explosiveness, power, speed, all of that. Sermon is more of a between the tackles bruiser type. And then Goodson kind of gives you some of the flash that Taylor has. So the two backups can kind of combine to give you what Jonathan Taylor is. Not at his level, but stylistically, that's what they do. So there's that for me. And then as far as quarterback, I think they only roll with two. And then, something came out on Twitter shortly before this about you can have a practice. Your emergency quarterback can be from the practice squad as long as you call him up. And what is it, in an unlimited amount of times throughout the season now?
Yeah. So regular players, you have to call. I think you only have like the 4 call-outs before you have to bring them up I think it's 4. I remember 4 because the Colts had it with every receiver last year was pushing that boundary basically from their practice squad. But with the emergency quarterback, I believe you can have him on the practice squad all year. He has to be one of your 2 call-ups each week for him to qualify as the emergency quarterback. But you can do that, I believe, the entire season with that emergency quarterback. It's a rule they had an addendum for this year because last year you couldn't do it with a practice squad guy. So that's why every team had 3 quarterbacks, and they used their quarterback for that third rule. But this year you can have the guy on the practice squad. So I don't think many teams are going to have 3 quarterbacks this year on the roster. And when you're looking at the Colts, I think they're going to try to get Sammy down to the practice squad, which will be the first time for him because he's always made the roster. And then I think they might also try to get Jason Bean on there if he's healthy. I don't know the state of his shoulder right now. But if Jason Bean's healthy, I think they'll try to keep 2 on the practice squad. And then, whoever has a better week or whatever the game plan or whatever, you can make them the emergency quarterback throughout the week if need be. But this will be the first time I have Sam Ehlinger not making the team doing one of these. And it's literally just because of that rule. And shout out to Mike Chappell, obviously, for putting that out there. I think last night I saw him post something about it being like Ehlinger is probably going to be on the practice squad this year, which is what made me change my roster prediction for that. Quarterback, a little bit different because of that. Sammy will be kind of on the roster because of this emergency quarterback rule, but that will be the big difference there. But the only other position that we have in this segment here, Jake, is wide receiver. And I don't think we have much to really discuss with wide receiver. It's kind
exactly the same.
Yeah, this is the 6 guys we said going into camp. And while I do think DJ Montgomery really pushed for that final spot, I think he had a really good summer. I just think it comes down to special teams. And even last night, watching that preseason game, Doolin came back. This was his first preseason action, I think, of the summer. And immediately the top gunner, immediately on all the special teams units, immediately made a tackle, I think, as a gunner on one of them as well. And it's like, that's it right there. Unless they're getting Montgomery out there for gunner snaps, he's not going to be that wide receiver 6. Maybe they feel better about other guys being like gunners and stuff, but it was like right when Doolin came back, they put him as the outside gunner on punt team, and he made a tackle, and it's like, look, that's it. He's making the team. So I think these 6 guys that we've predicted all summer end up coming to fruition here in the next couple of weeks or next week, whatever it is.
Yeah, Montgomery was really the only one that truly threatened it for me. I definitely see them trying to get Montgomery, maybe Laquan Treadwell on the practice squad. You could probably throw Juwan Winfrey in there as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if Treadwell's going to make it that far because, that's a name that's bounced around the NFL, former first-round pick. I think he's done everything pretty much right this summer. He doesn't look like a first-round pick, but he's been productive throughout the summer. Definitely enough to get picked up somewhere else for a team that's kind of receiver needy. So coming up next, we are going to look at tight end, O-line, and D-line. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you make sure to make time for your hobbies. If you're Zach, he's mentioned that to you guys. Maybe you always make sure you get to the gym before you get ready for work. When your schedule's packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Personally, I really struggle with filling my small slivers of free time with relaxing items or things that bring me personal joy. Great example. I didn't get to my car from the stadium last night until 2 a.m. Got home at 4 a.m. I slept 3 hours today. Has anything stopped me from taking a nap? No, but there's work to do. And that is a toxic mindset that I have. If you're thinking of starting therapy, or you're like me and you probably ought to, then give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn.
And Locked On Colts everydayers. Fantasy football season is right around the corner, and we want to thank you for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. But for your second listen, enjoy Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. If you're like me, you've got multiple drafts coming up in the next week here, so you definitely want to get those daily insights into the best fantasy draft strategy so you can win those leagues, all 4, 5, 6, 7, 20 of them that you guys are part of this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Jake. So we got the least controversial positions out of the way at the top of the show: quarterback, running back, wide receiver. We really weren't going to have many differences there.
No,
just because it's kind of set in stone what's going to happen at those positions. Maybe they go 3 running backs, but they probably go 4. This is where it gets interesting, though. Tight end, I think, would have been more controversial if we didn't have the Jelani Woods reports, which it just came out again today, that Jelani Woods is going to be out 4 months with that toe injury. So for the Colts to have that, when you do your 53-man cut down, you can put 2 players on IR with designation to return. Jelani Woods seems like a lock for that. So you and I are both in perfect rhythm with the tight ends now because of that. We have Granson, Mo Alley-Cox, Drew Ogletree, and Will Mallory making it there at tight end. Offensive line, we have it a little bit different. So I'll read my offensive line first. We obviously have the starting 5 guys: Ryman, Nelson, Kelly, Fries, Braden Smith, Mack and Salves, Blake Freeland, Danny Pinter, Dalton Tucker. Got Dalton Tucker on there. And for me, I used my other IR spot. So there we go. Dalton Tucker making it. For my other IR spot, I put Tanner Bortolini on IR as well. Now, I don't know if his toe injury is nearly as big as Jelani Woods' toe injury. But for me, the main reason why I did this is it gives the Colts roster flexibility. And it's a player who I don't think was going to get many snaps anyway this season. I think Bortolini was behind Tucker and Pinter for interior offensive line snaps. Heck, he might even be behind Gonsalves to get interior offensive line snaps this season. So that's why I think, the Colts could play it safe with Bortolini, put him on IR on cut downs, get roster flexibility to keep a player like Tucker. And then if you want to bring Bortolini back later in the season, you think he's ready to go, then you can get him out there and going. So that's where I kind of differed a little bit. Jake will explain his in a second. And then for the defensive line, I had Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Tyquan Lewis, Laiatu Latu, Dio Dangbo. Those guys are obviously making it. Raekwon Davis. I had Taven Bryan. not for me personally, though.
Friend of the show.
Look, I don't trust the Colts to do the right thing here. I don't trust the Colts to do the right thing. But we had Tommy, or I had Tommy as well, Isaiah Land, and then Ebukam. I had them putting him on the IR that's not intended to return this season. I don't know why they haven't done that. Maybe they were waiting to see if they could put him on the IR designated to return. But I feel like they have other guys that probably take precedent over a torn Achilles right now, which is very, very unlikely for Ebukam to come back. So I have him going on the IR to just end his season. I don't know if you have that different, Jake, if you have him going on the IR to come back, but that's kind of how I use the flexibility here with my roster prediction.
As far as I know, once the season starts, there's not a cap anymore on guys you can bring back. I think
so.
That's a recent adjustment.
I think that's still the adjustment.
Yeah, so, and they can designate him to return really at any point. So I have them putting him on IR, and later down the road this season, if it feels like he's getting closer or something, or they think like Jelani Woods at this point now that he can make that push around Christmas or something to come back for the playoffs, maybe they do that.
So you have him making your initial 53 then, and then
And
putting him on
then
IR
put him
afterwards.
and then putting him. Yeah.
That means you have an extra roster spot afterwards, Jake. You got to use your extra roster spot
No,
too.
I don't. Everything is trimmed down. I have him on IR.
Okay.
But no, it's let's go ahead. I'll start with tight end because everything is actually it's the same. Woods on IR.
Same exact ones. Yeah.
Jordan Schultz came out with that tweet today that he's expected back around Christmas. You might as well just like kind of plan on not having him this season. I think it's safer to do that. I mean, if he comes back, that's great. But I mean, you might as well just kind of, charge forward as if he's not going to be available. And then he could be a nice cherry on top or a nice shot in the arm if he's there at the end of the year. But Mo, 0 to hero. It's funny because we said in this scenario, if this was the scenario going into the season, something has gone terribly wrong. And Kylan Granson and Mo are the primary two tight ends, but I don't feel like things have gone terribly wrong to this point. Oddly enough, like I still don't love that, no one has been able to unseat Mo for that spot just because we know he's so capped as a receiver. But I think it's going to be so situational. Like Drew Ogletree and Kylan are probably going to get more targets, and Mo is just kind of like going to be a stalwart in the run game as a blocker. I'm comfortable with that. It's very disappointing that like Jelani is not going to be able to take that next step and build off of what he did in 2022. That's definitely disappointing, but it is what it is. It's an injury. I think Will Mallory has looked good, but again, he has struggled with consistently being healthy as well. So the tight end group didn't really take the jump we wanted it to, but I don't think that they're like some big dark spot on the roster. You would have hoped to see more, but it's not really a problem. So I'll explain my lines further now that we got that out of the way. So I've got obviously the starting five: Matt Gonsalves, Blake Freeland. I have Tanner Bortolini on there, not as an IR spot, and then Dalton Tucker as well. And then on my D line, obviously Kwity Paye, Buck Grove, Tyquan Lewis, Laiatu, Dio, and Raekwon Davis. Tommy Adebawore, I've got him. I've got Isaiah Land, and then I've got Ebukam on IR. No Taven Bryan for me. For me, it is the fact that Raekwon Davis is back and that Tommy has looked great. He looks like he's taken those next steps that you hope to see. Taking the steps that you haven't really seen from Eric Johnson in the last couple of years. You're seeing that out of Tommy. So I think those two things together, the fact that Davis has been able to practice already, he got on the field last night. I think that definitely helps. And there's no hiding the fact that he's much more of a natural nose backup than Taven is. So we'll see on that one. I just don't. You say it's a trust issue with you. You don't trust the Colts to make the right move. We've seen veterans get booted off for young guys before, and we'll see. I mean, they preach youth and giving guys snaps. We'll see if they put their money where their mouth is on that one.
Jake, I'll be pumped if I'm wrong here.
I know you would be a fan of that.
Look, I think Taven Bryan's a fine pass rusher. It's just he gets out there for too many run snaps. Like it kills me, man. There is one thing I wanted to add because you didn't go over it, and I just wanted to add more context to what you did. You didn't have Danny Pinter making your initial, and
right. And something with Bortolini being there is the difference.
Something with Pinter is I don't think he hit vested vet status, so he would have to go through waivers, I believe. Whereas other players like if you cut a Taven Bryan, he's a vested vet. He just becomes a free agent right away. He doesn't go through waivers, I don't believe. Or a Rodney Harrison, which I had not making the roster, but I'll explain my reasoning in my last segment. So you do expose Pinter a little bit because I think this is Pinter's 5th season, but he's only been active for 3 of them. So technically he didn't hit that vested vet status. So he would go through waivers. I don't know if anyone would claim him, I don't know if anyone out there loves Danny Pinter as much as we do in Indy, and he probably would make it to the practice squad, but that's just something to keep in mind with some of this stuff. But you had Bortolini beating him outright. I had both of them on there because the Colts like Danny Pinter, obviously. There's a lot of ways to go. And then, obviously, the Taven Bryan difference that we had. I would do it too, Jake. I would totally do it. It's just...
You're just protecting your heart, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm scared, man. I'm scared of trusting. I'm scared of trusting,
You've
but
been
yeah.
hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So coming up to polish this thing off, we're looking at the back end of the defense, linebackers, cornerbacks, and safety. It's going to get juicy now. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals who are actually right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board either. They actually help hire the professionals who you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role elsewhere. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, then you're looking in the wrong spot. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. They're constantly finding new ways to make the process easier, even recently launching a feature that helps you write job descriptions because that's boring and it seems like a lot of admin, but they got you covered on that. They make the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so let's talk linebacker first. This was a tough group for me because I was trying to balance what I would do versus what I think the Colts are going to do, because I think they like a lot of these linebackers. Like, I think they'd keep all of them if they could. But ultimately, I landed on just 5 of them, which, am I wrong? Did they keep 7 last year?
Yeah, they rotated between 6 and 7 at times last year. Yep.
Yeah, I thought they kept a huge number. So I have them just with 5 right now. Obviously, Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, Jalen Carlisle, Saguna Luby, and Grant Stewart. Those are 5 that I am very confident that will make the roster. Now, could there be a couple more that make it? Sure. Like Cam McGrone was a tough cut for me. I think, who else was the other? The new guy,
Austin Ajaki.
Ajaki was, but the new guy, Mike Smith. We got to figure that out with whatever that contract is, because
So I did figure that out. He's an undrafted free agent who hadn't signed anywhere yet. So undrafted free agents get a standard 3-year deal.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
so
that
that's what
was
it
such a
was.
confusing situation. So like, why do you sign this dude to a 3-year deal this late in the summer? That's like guaranteeing him a spot. But
Yeah.
okay,
Shout out
so
Brad Spielberger, he formerly a Pro Football Focus, their contract guy. He explained that to me.
No
So,
one I had talked to knew what was going on with that. So I'm glad that there's some clarity on that. But yeah, that's my 5 linebackers. Very confident in those guys. Cornerback is where you and I are going to start to butt heads a little bit. So Kenny, Juju, Jalen Jones, obviously, Dallas Flowers. I have Chris Lamons making it, as well as the 2 rookies with Micah Abraham and Jalen Simpson. And then at safety, I've just got 4: Julian Blackman, Nick Cross, Rodney Thomas, and Trevor Denbo, which makes Ronnie Harrison the odd man out. So Rodney Thomas is a core special teamer, and it was a really tough cut for me in between him and Ronnie Harrison. I do think Thomas is a bit of a one-trick pony as a free safety, whereas Harrison they say he can play free safety, but he's a strong safety. But he's done linebacker for them as well, and some special teams. Denbo is going to be the one that a lot of people are going to be like, why is he on there? Well, he's a core special teamer as well, and he's one of only like 2 players who they trust to be the personal protector on the punt team. It's him and Kylan Granson. That's a very niche need that he is there for, and so I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yep, I know, I completely agree. And to add context to some of my stuff here, I'm going to go through what I did at each position, add my kind of own context too. So I had the same 5 linebackers that Jake had, and Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, Jalen Carlisle, Saguna Luby, and Grant Stewart. And I do think the Colts like these linebackers a lot. Like, I could see up to 3 of them being on the practice squad like they did with wide receiver last year, and then using the linebacker position on the practice squad to be like a game day elevation for more special teams roles. So we could see a Jockey, Craig Young, Liam Anderson, like all these guys coming up on game day to serve as like a special teams, like limited snap type role. And they use up the guys like for game day elevations and then keep them on the practice squad the rest of the year. So I do think 5 is a lot less than what they typically do. And it doesn't make as much sense because of the kickoff rule. But I do think it does make sense in terms of they have a lot of guys they could just bring up for that particular role on game day elevations and stuff like that. Now, corner is where we differed quite a bit. You kept 2 slot guys. I didn't keep any slot guys behind Kenny Moore. I kept Kenny, Juju, Jalen Jones, Dallas Flowers, Darrell Baker Jr., and Jalen Simpson, and I cut both Lamons and Abraham. And I think the Colts, ideally, you can get Lamons on the practice squad because he's a vested vet, wouldn't go through waivers. The Colts like him. They're going to say, like, hey, just come back to the practice squad and you'll get game day elevations as well. Like, that one awesome play. That one play was amazing. Some of the other stuff hasn't been fully ready yet. And I don't know if there's too much fear in another team grabbing him. Now, I could be wrong. They could lose him. Like, he's a fun player. And I really do think there is a long-term potential for him in this league. But yeah, I don't think he's fully ready. And I'm more scared of losing Simpson than I am of losing Abraham, because Simpson, he's shown that ability to turn and run with wide receivers this preseason. And that's just such a valuable trait that I don't think any other corner in this room really has right now. So Simpson, I just don't want to lose right now. Now for safety, I kind of did my cheating thing. I kept 4-ish to 5-ish because, like I said earlier, I put Trace Herman on the 53-man roster and then put him on IR after making the 53-man roster. So I have one extra roster spot because of that. And Ronnie Harrison, being a vested vet, he's just going to get cut. You can say, like, hey, don't leave the city. We'll sign you back the next day. Bring Harrison back onto the roster the next day after you put Servant on IR. And then you have Harrison back on the roster. So technically we both had 4 safeties making it, Jake, but I had it being like after the initial Harrison can come back and be on the team there. But yeah, I'm with you when it comes to the safety room. Like, if it were me personally, I think Thomas and Harrison, I'd probably start over if I saw a safety on the market that I like better and just one after more like versatile guys, especially with the Colts playing a lot of quarters this preseason. Like, I don't think these guys are good quarter safeties because they're very role specific. So that's what I would do at the safety position. But I do think the Colts like Thomas enough to where they would keep him around for another year. And then Harrison just gives you that veteran that can communicate and do some good things back there when he's out, like in terms of communication. So yeah, that's where I am with that. Corner is the really interesting one with us, Jake, because you've been at all the practices. I haven't been to any of the practices this year. So what did you see from Lamons and Abraham that put them over Baker? And I guess not Simpson, but like over like a guy like Baker. Because what I've seen in the preseason games, Baker's looked pretty good. Like, that's where I kind of went with Baker, is like, he's looked pretty good in the stuff I've seen, but you've seen more practices, obviously.
So for me with Lamons, I think they like him a lot. Personally, I would probably move off of him and just let Micah Abraham go at it. But I think they like him a good deal. I'm not really sure why. It goes back to last year. He was a guy who wasn't anywhere else in the league, and then they signed him even though he was going to be suspended. Like, I don't know. They just seem to like him a lot. Abraham, I think, has a special trait in playmaking and being a ball hawk that you just can't teach. He is someone who they drafted despite his, low testing and size. Like, he's below the thresholds they normally have. They knew that going in, and then they've already seen the playmaking that they drafted him for come to fruition. I did still have Simpson making it, but for me, it was either going to be Simpson or Baker because of just the numbers. And it's for all the same reasons you said. Like, he has elite speed and he has a higher ceiling. Baker has done some nice things. He was one of the, training camp darlings last summer and has had a fine time this summer. But it's just like, is that enough?
Yeah.
And I mean, it seemed like they tried to hide him at times last year, which has he regained their trust or not? We don't know.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I could maybe differ a little bit here is with Lamons. Again, I'm not sure if you cut this guy, he has much like any interest anywhere else. Sure. Like, I'm just being completely honest. I think Lamont had a fine offseason too. Like, I don't think he's been bad by any means, but I think he has more potential in Indy, obviously, to get playing time. And I wonder if they try to do something where it's like with Lamont, like, hey, this kid Abraham and this kid Simpson, we like both these kids. We want to keep them on the roster because we don't want to lose them. but Lamons, let's have him on the practice squad for those 4 call-ups, and then we'll make a decision after the 4 call-ups if we want to get him to the roster. Because look, injuries happen during the season,
Right.
and you can make 7 cornerbacks work more so during the season when injuries pile up than you can on the initial 53. So if you tell Lamons, hey, the first month you'll be on the practice squad, but we'll call you up each game, and then after that we'll make another decision to likely call you up. I wonder if that's something they could do for roster flexibility. Like Lamont seems like the type of guy where that could make sense to do. And that way you don't lose or expose one of Abraham or Simpson to the waiver wire.
No, that kind of roster management and maneuvering, I mean, that always happens. It's just about, you don't know what kind of curveballs the Colts are going to throw, because after their cut downs last year, I almost throw expectations out the window. Like, they went and do it with 3 receivers. Yes. I mean, they did some maneuvering and brought Isaiah McKenzie back to make it 4, but that still wasn't enough, So I'm trying to just go off vibes on these and like I don't want to project too much of like the maneuvering that they're going to do, because it's tough to say with them. And then, I mean, it might even be a moot point when it comes to waiver pickups and everything, because these guys who are going to be like our tough final additions to the roster might give them the boot right after that when they see something else shinier out on waivers.
Oh, man, we can never forget the Andre Sacheret of that offseason or whatever. We're all excited that he worked his way onto the roster, had a great offseason, like a fantastic offseason. The next day he gets cut for like a waiver claim. I can't remember who the waiver claim was at this time, but yeah, it's just what happens, man. So we're going to be here being like, Dalton Tucker should make the team and all of these guys. And Dalton Tucker is likely the top guy on the chopping block if he does make the team, for when the team grabs like 1 or 2 guys on waivers, post cut down. So we'll see, guys. We'll be here covering all the cut down news as they happen. We'll also be covering who the Colts claim on waivers afterwards as well. So it's a fun time coming up. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Now go listen to Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight into the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. If you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get that inside scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. We're also on TikTok and on Instagram. So search up Locked On Colts on those 2 platforms as well. Also subscribe to us on YouTube where we list your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here next week, probably next week, maybe over the weekend, but next week.